scientist is drilling through ice in the most remote place on Earth. 3 kilometers of solid white pressing down from above. The drill bites deeper, deeper, and then it breaks through. Not into rock, not into ancient compressed earth. Into water, liquid water, sitting in complete darkness, untouched for 15 million years. The scientists stare at their instruments in silence because something down there, something in that sealed, lightless, frozen world is alive. That lake exists right now, beneath your feet if you were standing on the Antarctic ice sheet. And what lives inside it is only one piece of a much larger puzzle. A puzzle that begins not with ice, but with jungle, with predators, with a world so violent and alive that if you dropped into it without warning, you would not last a day. This is the real story of Antarctica, not the story of a frozen wasteland, but the story of a living world that was buried and what it left behind. But to understand what's beneath that ice, we need to go back, a very long way back. Close your eyes and imagine Antarctica the way most people picture it. White, silent, endless. A place where nothing grows and almost nothing lives. Where the wind carves the snow into shapes and the cold has an almost physical weight to it. 3 kilometers of ice in some places stacked so deep that if you drilled straight down from the surface, you'd pass through more frozen water than the entire volume of the Amazon River. And somewhere underneath all of that, rock. Ancient, forgotten ground that hasn't seen sunlight in tens of millions of years. We think of Antarctica as a dead place, a permanent place, a place that has always been this way. But here's what no one tells you in school. Antarctica was not always ice. There was a time millions of years before the first human ever existed when this continent was warm, when rivers cut through dense rainforests, when the air was thick with humidity and the ground vibrated with the weight of creatures that no longer walk the earth. Antarctica wasn't the end of the world, it was the heart of it. And the proof has been hiding in plain sight for over a century, buried under that same ice we all assume has been there forever. The story begins not on the ice, but in a conference hall in Berlin. The year is 1912. A German meteorologist named Alfred Wegener stands in front of a room full of scientists and says something that makes them laugh. He says, "The continents move." Not metaphorically, literally. He says that hundreds of millions of years ago, all of Earth's land masses were locked together in one enormous supercontinent, and then slowly, over millions of years, they cracked apart, drifted, like massive puzzle pieces floating on a hidden sea of molten rock. The room erupts. Scientists shake their heads. Some get up and walk out. The idea of continents moving is, to them, like saying the moon walks. It's not just wrong, it's embarrassing. But Wegener had a clue that no one could explain away. He'd looked at a world map and he noticed something simple, something so obvious it's almost funny in hindsight. The eastern coast of South America and the western coast of Africa fit together perfectly, like the two halves of a torn photograph. And the biggest clue of all was coming from Antarctica. Fossils of tropical plants, bones of creatures that had no business being in a frozen wasteland. The same species appearing in Antarctica, South America, and Africa. Not similar species, the same ones. As if those continents had once shared a single continuous jungle floor. But no one believed him. They called him a fool. And in 1930, Alfred Wegener died in the Greenland ice 50 degrees below zero during an expedition. He died before the world admitted he was right. In 1960, oceanographers finally scanned the floor of the deep ocean and found the proof Wegener never lived to see. The seafloor was spreading, cracking apart from the middle, pushing the continents outward like slow-motion ripples from a stone dropped in water. Wegener's theory of continental drift became the foundation of modern geology, and it unlocked the true history of Antarctica. 200 million years ago, Antarctica was not alone at the bottom of the world. It was part of a supercontinent unter Gondwana, locked together with South America, Africa, Australia, and India. Animals could walk between these land masses, plants spread freely, and the climate warm, wet, generous, covered everything in green. Antarctica sat further north than it does today. Its temperature hovered around 12 degrees Celsius, not tropical, but alive. Completely, violently, magnificently alive. Now here's where it gets strange, because most of us, when we hear that Antarctica once had forests and rivers, assume that was ancient history, the era of dinosaurs, a world so distant it barely feels real. What we don't expect is just how recent some of this was, and just how extreme the life that filled this continent truly was. Let's start at the beginning, the era of the dinosaurs. In the Transantarctic Mountains, a jagged spine of rock that cuts across the continent, there's a place called Mount Kirkpatrick. It sits at 12,500 feet above sea level, 600 kilometers from the South Pole. And buried in its rock, scientists found a fossil that stopped them cold. A dinosaur, an apex predator, living in Antarctica. Its name is Cryolophosaurus, and the name alone tells you something. Cryo means cold, because even then, Antarctica was already cooling. This creature lived approximately 190 million years ago, and it was a meat-eater. A large theropod, think of a smaller relative of the T-Rex, but with one feature that sets it apart: a distinctive fan-shaped crest of bone rising above its eyes. Not for show, for recognition. For dominance, Cryolophosaurus wasn't alone. The same site revealed another species, Glacialosaurus, a long-necked plant-eater lumbering through Antarctic forests, probably covering enormous distances each day just to find enough food. Two species, two roles, predator and prey. The full architecture of a living ecosystem. Picture it. Antarctica's forests dark, dense, draped in moisture. A Glacialosaurus moves between the tree trunks, pulling at high branches with its neck extended. And then, a sound. A shift in the undergrowth. Cryolophosaurus emerges faster, more precise, and the chase begins. This was Antarctica. Not a place of stillness, a place of survival. But the dinosaurs' reign ended 66 million years ago, when an asteroid struck the Yucatan Peninsula with the force of 1 billion nuclear bombs. The Chicxulub impactor. The sky went dark with dust and smoke. Forests caught fire across multiple continents. The sun dimmed, food chains collapsed, and 75% of all species on Earth were gone within a geological blink. Antarctica burned too. Its dinosaurs died. Its forests were scorched. But here is the twist that most people miss entirely. Antarctica did not become ice after the asteroid, not even close. After the dust settled and the sky cleared, the Earth began warming again. Carbon dioxide flooded the atmosphere, and Antarctica slowly, impossibly came back to life. What returned to fill the silence was different from the dinosaurs. In some ways, it was worse. The period that followed the asteroid impact is called the Eocene, and specifically, scientists refer to one peak as the Eocene thermal maximum. It was one of the hottest periods in the last 100 million years. Antarctica, in some locations, reached temperatures of 25 degrees Celsius. Warm enough for palm trees. Warm enough for crocodilians. Warm enough for something that, if you saw it emerge from the undergrowth today, you would mistake for a nightmare. In 2024, researchers studied a set of claw fossils recovered from Seymour Island off the Antarctic Peninsula. These weren't the claws of any ordinary bird. They belonged to a terror bird. Terror birds were flightless predators, but calling them birds almost undersells them. The one whose fossils were found in Antarctica stood approximately 6 feet tall, weighed more than 100 kilograms. Its beak, massive, hooked, downward curving, functioned less like a tool for eating and more like a weapon for execution. Its legs were built for speed. Estimated top velocity, nearly 50 kilometers per hour. 6 feet tall, 100 kilos, 50 kilometers per hour, and claws that could open a rib cage. Now put that creature in a jungle. It doesn't roar, it doesn't announce itself. It waits, hidden in the dense green, eyes tracking, still as a stone. And then some smaller animal, some unfortunate mammal sniffing at the forest floor, moves too close. And the terror bird explodes out of cover, not a chase, not a pursuit, an execution. It's over before the prey understands what's happening. The terror bird wasn't alone in these forests. A cast of creatures had made their way to Antarctica via land bridges still connected to South America. Among them, Notangulata, heavy, stocky plant, eaters roughly the weight of a modern muskox. strange-faced animals with features that suggested tapir-like snouts, rhinoceros-shaped herbivores called astropothers, and a tiny ancient mammal Sudamerica ameginoi that had somehow survived the asteroid impact and crept forward into a new world. All of them lived beneath the shadow of that beak, but the terror bird's territory had a boundary. Beyond the tree line, past the undergrowth, the rivers began, and in those rivers, something else was waiting. For a long time, scientists suspected Antarctica's warm rivers must have hosted crocodilians. The climate was right. The ecosystem demanded them. But suspicion isn't proof, and for years, the proof refused to surface. Then, a single fossil fragment changed everything. A bony plate, an osteodermal scute, the kind of armored scale embedded in a crocodile's skin. One piece. But one piece was enough. Scientists ran the calculations. The Antarctic crocodile, based on that fragment, is estimated to have reached 23 feet in length. 7 meters! That is roughly the size of the largest saltwater crocodiles alive on Earth today, and possibly larger. This was not a regional croc, this was a dominant predator of Antarctica's river systems. You know how a modern crocodile hunts. The water goes still, the surface shows nothing. You could stare at the river for an hour and never know it was there. And then an animal approaches to drink and the water explodes. One movement. The crocodile's jaws close and the animal is dragged beneath the surface before it can process what has happened. Now scale that up to 23 feet. The Antarctic forest had its terror bird, the rivers had their giant crocodile, but neither was the most terrifying predator in this ecosystem. For that, you had to go to the sea. Antarctica's ancient coastline was alive in a way that today's frigid Southern Ocean can barely suggest. And the creatures swimming through those warm prehistoric waters were unlike anything a modern diver would recognize. Start with the penguins, because even they were different here. Two species in particular, Anthropornis and Palaeodiptis, grew to extraordinary sizes. Some estimates put them at over 6 feet 9 inches tall, weighing more than 100 kilograms. These were not the waddling, comical birds that today's documentaries love to film. These were powerful, muscular swimming machines built for depth, built for speed, built for hunting fish and squid in open ocean. But even a 6'9" penguin is prey for something. Basilosaurus moved through Antarctica's warm shallows, but calling it a whale feels misleading. Modern whales are filter feeders, gentle giants that most people associate with grace. Basilosaurus was different. Its body was long and serpentine, less like a modern whale, more like a marine snake built around a powerful jaw. Its teeth could pierce bone. Some forms reached 40 feet in length. And it wasn't solitary, it hunted. Another ancient whale, Lenocetus, had a full set of teeth in its jaws, unlike any whale alive today. The fossil recovered from Seymour Island came from a juvenile the size of a modern orca. Sit with that for a moment. A juvenile, already orca-sized. The adults would have dwarfed it. And then the sharks. Goblin sharks, 6-gill sharks, 7-gill sharks, and one in particular from the Otodus lineage, a group that would eventually produce Megalodon. Otodus auriculatus reached 31 feet in length and was already hunting in Antarctic waters tens of millions of years ago. Giant penguins swimming above ancient whales circling below, and Megalodon's ancestor waiting at the edge of the light. Antarctica was not a paradise. It was not a quiet, green Eden. It was a layered killing ground, terror birds at the forest edge, giant crocodiles in the rivers, serpentine whale predators, and mega sharks in the sea. Every level of this ecosystem ran on violence. And then 34 million years ago, it ended. Not quickly, not dramatically, slowly, quietly, in a way that made it even more terrible. Antarctica began to separate from South America. A channel opened between them, the Drake Passage. On the other side, Australia pulled away, creating what's called the Tasmanian Gateway. For the first time in hundreds of millions of years, Antarctica was an island, completely encircled by open ocean. And that changed everything. When the ocean route around Antarctica opened, a new current was born, the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, the most powerful ocean current on Earth. It moved in a continuous loop around the continent, and it did something devastating. It blocked warm water from ever reaching Antarctica's coasts again. At the same time, the atmosphere began drawing down its carbon dioxide. Less CO2, less greenhouse effect, less warmth. The temperature began to fall. Here's where the twist arrives, and it's not what you'd expect. Because the freeze didn't come suddenly, it came in stages. And each stage was its own obituary for a different kind of life. First, the tropical forests died, replaced by cooler, temperate forests still alive, still green, but diminished. Then, those forests thinned. Then, shrubs replaced them. Then, the shrubs retreated. Then, the first ice sheets formed at the poles of the continent. And as ice formed, something happened that no one could stop. The white ice reflected sunlight back into space instead of absorbing it, which made the continent colder, which made more ice form, which reflected more light, which made it colder still. A self-reinforcing loop. A death spiral. And once it started, there was no mechanism to reverse it. The terror birds had nowhere to go, no land bridges left to cross. The giant crocodiles, cold-blooded and dependent on warmth, began dying off. Forest animals starved as their food disappeared. The giant penguins built for warm Antarctic waters vanished one by one as the ocean temperatures plummeted and the prey they depended on migrated north. The ancient whales followed warmer water. The mega sharks followed the whales. And Antarctica went silent. Not in a day, not in a year. Over millions of years, the most biodiverse continent on Earth became the most lifeless. A world that had been running on full power, screaming, hunting, growing, dying, reproducing, was slowly, methodically shut off. Layer by layer, the ice came. And everything it covered, every forest, every riverbed, every set of bones was locked away, preserved in geological cold storage. A time capsule the size of a continent, 3 kilometers deep. And what's locked inside that ice, that's where the story gets strange again. Beneath the ice of East Antarctica, buried under 3 kilometers of solid white, there is a mountain range, the Gamburtsev Mountains, the size of the European Alps. Peaks, valleys, glacial formations, a complete, fully developed mountain system, invisible to human eyes because no human eye has ever seen it directly. Soviet researchers detected it in 1958 using seismic instruments dragged across the surface. Since then, satellite radar mapping has filled in the picture. We know those mountains are there. We know roughly what they look like. We have never stood inside them. They sit in total darkness, total silence, encased in ice that hasn't moved significantly in tens of millions of years. But the mountains are not the strangest discovery. Beneath the ice of East Antarctica, 4 kilometers down, there is a lake, Lake Vostok. It is one of the largest lakes on Earth, roughly the size of Lake Ontario, and it has been sealed completely, hermetically sealed, for an estimated 15 million years. No sunlight has reached it, no fresh air, no connection to the world above. The ice above it acts as a lid that has never been lifted. Russian scientists drilled down to it over the course of more than 2 decades. The project was painstaking, dangerous, and obsessive. When they finally pierced the ice sheet in 2012 and drew up water samples from that sealed lake, the scientific community held its breath. What they found was alive. Microbial life. Bacteria adapted to complete darkness, extreme cold, crushing pressure, and 15 million years of isolation. Life that has been evolving quietly, invisibly, with no input from the outside world since before the first human ancestors walked upright in Africa. And here is the question that no one can answer yet. What else is down there? Lake Vostok is not the only subglacial lake in Antarctica. Scientists have now identified over 400 lakes beneath the Antarctic ice sheet. Some are connected by rivers, actual flowing rivers, hidden under kilometers of ice, linking these lightless bodies of water in a subterranean network. A hidden hydrosphere. Think about what that means. Not one sealed world. Hundreds of them, each one isolated. Each one potentially hosting life that has been cut off from the surface for millions of years. Each one evolving along its own trajectory, responding to its own pressures, its own chemistry, its own invisible ecosystem dynamics.